Hi there, Kings and Queens. Welcome to another video with me, Hitchens. Today we're playing a game called Dagon, inspired by a short story by H.P. Lovecraft. So I'm hoping that it's got quite a few of these Lovecraftian creatures. I'm not sure what to expect. I'm not sure what this is about. I've never read any of H.P. Lovecraft's novels or anything like that. It was the early 1900s, and nowadays I'm not an avid reader. Oh God, that makes me sound like I was born in the 1900s. I'm not. Very, very late 1900s, 1994. But it's not important. If you're wondering what I mean by Lovecraftian creatures, it's like frighteningly monstrous and otherworldly, horrific type, creepy type monsters, basically. Like the stuff you see in Souls games, like Elden Ring, for example, with Godric the Great, Godric the Grafted, even. Like when he cuts off his arm and he, gets the dragon on his thing. Spoilers, by the way, guys. But yeah, let's jump right in and see where we go with this, guys. Well, that got deep fast. During the game, you will encounter interactive elements, and some will allow you to continue your journey. Others reveal interesting facts about the original short stories. Presuming you've got lateral and former interactive lore. Hidden, find secrets, focus eyes, unsigned, right that. Bloody blah, let's go. Ooh, window. I like the textures and the look of this. This is really nice. Like the shine of the bottle's cool too. Can I move? Okay. I guess we click this.
If endurable,
Sorry,
I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below.
The end. Well, that escalated very quickly.
Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate.
We're gonna write. Okay, cool.
When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
Okay, what's this? Morphine. Morphine entered into the use in the 19th century and was routinely administered to treat severe pain during the American Civil War and World War I. It was also sold without restrictions until 1914. Morphine became more popular than other inventions of the hypodermic needle syringe even around 1845. Frederick Sir Jr., who first isolated the substance, originally named it morphium after Morpheus, the Greek god associated with dreams. I guess that's aptly named. At the time when Dagon was published, morphine abuse, known as soldier's disease, already posed a big problem in the United States. It was interesting, I didn't actually know that.
It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider.
Supercargo? Oh, with Clark Kent?
The Great War was then at its very beginning,
Is that the sun?
and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation.
Venus?
So that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners.
I like the water though. The sky is really cool. Not too much to the sky, which makes it, nice. Oh, the stars. Ooh, facts. The Huns were Central Asian nomads who established a dominion in Europe and invaded the Romans in the 5th century AD. Excuse me. They were known as brutal deadly warriors and masters of quick raids, who also developed powerful composite bows, lassos, and early siege weapons. During World War I, the British used the word Hun as a synonym for the Germans. Emphasis their brutality. Okay. Makes sense. Getting quite a lot of interesting facts here.
So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time.
It's the moon. Never mind. Ooh, eat the food.
When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings.
Oh, that's better for the moon. No, like a tiny speck like a star in the distance.
Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator.
Not a competent navigator. Because that is totally the sun. Yeah, I see why you say that you're not very competent at that. It's the moon.
Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight.
I mean, I presume if you count it as a celestial body.
The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land.
It's rising and just hasn't arrived yet. Oh, it's late. Oh look, water.
But neither ship nor land
there
appeared,
it is. That's better.
And I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue.
Me. That's what despair sounds like, right?
The change happened whilst I slept.
It's going to turn into a monster.
Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous.
Oh, I've seen this hentai before. God, that's massive. Look at it. It's the size of the ship. That's very specky.
When at last I awoke,
right? Oh,
it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see.
Yep, definitely the start of a hentai.
And in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished. For there was in the air, and in the rotting soil, a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish, and of other, less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain.
That was larger than I expected. That was a good trick.
Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity.
Crustacean, octopus, whatever the fuck you want to call it.
There was nothing within hearing, and nothing in sight, save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear.
Landscape.
The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
I wonder if that is why you reflected the stars. It had some, effect. I'm not gonna lie, this isn't like my usual games I play.
As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths.
The hell is that in the distance? Pulsating and writhing.
So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things.
Right. Octofish.
For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens.
Is that a spear or a paddle? It's like a spear. I know it's a paddle.
As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue.
Oh, I see what they did with the sun. It was behind us the entire time. So where are we going? Right, grab a bag and run.
On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease.
Alright, so they're not stars, because there's no stars in the sky. It's the middle of the day.
The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal.
Ugh, the sounds.
All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert.
Definitely creepy. Oh, I know there's fish, but the first thing is spider when I see this thing. Keep going.
That night, I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it.
Well, if you're walking towards it, things do get closer, don't they? How it works. You move closer to it, the closer it is.
By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again, and in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence.
That must be his pack. Right, let's go.
I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine.
Right. That would be creepy.
I felt myself on the edge of the world,
No idea what's in the darkness.
peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost, and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined. Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent,
Do you really want to descend into that?
whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me. An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself. But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express. For despite its enormous magnitude, and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely. The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm.
All faces.
And revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures.
Cyclopean's a big word for me. No idea what that means.
The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
Storytelling methods. Dagon contains many themes of storytelling methods that Lovecraft developed in his later works, such as telling the story through carvings, the Mountains of Madness, the Nameless City, journalists and characters' notes, the Shadow of Time, the Haunter of the Darkness, islands emerging from the ocean, the Call of Cthulhu, or fictional beings and deities based on real events and mythologies. Migu and the Whisper in the Darkness, also considered the origin of the popular Cthulhu mythos. Some of the Lovecraft's other stories also include in a manner similar to Dagon, but let's keep the details in order to spoil the ending. I like how they'd put that at the end. Different storytelling methods.
Plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a doré.
Doré?
I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint.
To be fair, that top face does look really creepy.
Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer.
Bottom one looks familiar. I'm sure I've seen that in a game. Remember that main character of the Date Simulator where he pulls his jaw off?
They were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seemed to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background. For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself.
So this thing killed a whale by himself. That's really fucking terrifying.
I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it.
Oh what? So what? What? What are we looking at?
With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface,
Oh,
the thing
shit.
slid into view above the dark waters.
Slid into that
Loathsome,
fucking
it
slid
darted
my
a
ass.
stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith.
Christ. That wasn't a slide, that was a fucking rocket out of water.
About which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little.
Trying to climb up.
I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing.
Well, this is
I have
certainly interesting.
indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing. Nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe.
Okay, so getting interesting. Lovecraft was a prominent figure in the world of amateur journalism. In 1915, he started publishing his own journals called The Conservative, which included political and social commentary, poetry, short stories, and literary criticism written by him and other authors. Okay. It's creepy enough in itself.
Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god.
Meaning deity of the Philistines worshipped throughout the Middle East, an ancient god. Fertility and crops. In Hebrew, Dagon was a common noun for grain. The rules of Akkad. Mesopotamia. Chose him as a patron saint of the war conquests. He also appeared as the judge of the dead. Assyrian poem, the underworld prison warden of the Babylonian texts. Okay. A very fancy looking room.
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
Okay, so we're going to and fro the cupboards. Why?
It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men. Often, I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm. A mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man of war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite.
That was creepy.
I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium.
That is vivid. That's supposed to be New York.
The end is near.
Excuse you? I'm writing here, do you mind?
I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it. It shall not find me.
Well, that was,
God,
great thinking.
that hand! The window! The window!
The window. Whoa! Christ. Thank you for playing. Hope you enjoyed this immersive immersion of the Cosmos horror battle DLCs. Cool. Well, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. If you liked that sort of thing, please leave a comment, and I will try at some point to go through the other Dagon games, such as the Eldritch and so on, the Eldritch box, the Little Glass Bottle, etc., and Tales of Herring Lake. But guys, thanks so much for watching. That was very interesting indeed, very creepy, and just interesting. It's not usually my cup of tea, but that was pretty fun, guys. So thank you so much. Take care now. Bye bye.